So last time we got together, we ended, I think, on verse 27 of the Dhammapada, but it's maybe 2/3 of the way through or 3/4 the way through the section or chapter on heedfulness or diligence, however we want to translate that. So I thought I'd start by just reading from the beginning so we kind of have some context, the beginning of this section. It's actually verse 21. And this is a very important verse. I just heard a talk. I was just listening to a talk by Ajahn Sumedho the other day where he said this verse in the Dhammapada is one that he really has reflected on often, because he is, as we all probably are, I don't think I want to say should be, but it's the goal of the practice to really understand the Dhamma, realize the Dhamma, in order to have insight into the deathless. And here it says heedfulness. It's appamado, so heedfulness or diligence. Heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are already dead. It's page 11 in your book. Heedfulness, number 2. I mean, it's section 2, verse 21. And then it goes on, clearly understanding this excellence of heedfulness, the wise exult therein and enjoy the resort of the noble ones. The wise develop on the path and attain or realize the various stages of awakening. 23, the wise ones ever meditative and steadfastly persevering experience nibbana, the incomparable freedom from bondage. Ever grows the glory of one who is energetic, mindful, and pure in conduct, discerning and self-controlled, righteous and heedful. The foolish and ignorant indulge in heedlessness, but the wise one guards heedfulness as their best treasure. I did. Oh, sorry. Number 25. By effort and heedfulness, discipline and self-mastery, let the wise one make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. So that's a theme we see in the suttas. The Buddha talking about making an island unto yourself. He particularly talked about this when he knew he was going to die. And of course, the people around him, he would tell them, I've given up the life force. I'll be dying in 3 months. That's how it started. And then, as he traveled through the countryside and talked with many of the people that he had been meeting with for years, and talked to them, giving them his last sermon, he would talk about this, how you have to make an island onto yourself from the Dhamma, that he was leaving the Dhamma behind, or the Dhamma would still be there. And it's something that people often wonder, how does that square up with, friends on the path, good friends, Kalyanamita on the path, or the whole of the holy life. And so really both are true, that we look to our teachers, particularly the Buddha in the suttas is noted as the best friend we can have. And that's true. And also that we have to come to the Dhamma ourselves, realize it, experience it directly ourselves. And when we do that, then we are an island that nothing can overwhelm, because we're already clear that everything in this world is impermanent, changeable. We can't depend upon it. to not attach to it. So realization of nibbana, or the awakening, is really about awakening to the reality that identifying with any sankharas, any conditioned phenomena, is foolishness, is heedlessness. So this is one of the things Ajahn Sumedho said in the talk I was referring to. It's like when we're heedless, that's whenever we're operating from the sense of self and we're identifying with our personality or identifying with our body, that's a moment of heedlessness. So you kind of really start to feel how heedfulness leads to this full understanding of nibbana. And it also, in some way, is this full understanding. We really, at the deepest level, in the clearest way, heedfulness really is awakening. The foolish and ignorant indulge in heedlessness, but the wise one guards heedfulness as their best treasure. And then the last verse that we took last time is, do not give way to heedlessness. Do not indulge in sensual pleasures. Only the heedful and meditative attain great happiness. So I want to know, do you believe what I just said about heedfulness and, the deathless, the identification with our personality or our physical presence, body? What do you think? Yeah, Carrie?
Yes, I do think that that's really something very desirable. But I did have a question about the deathless, because this past weekend and I was at Vedanta Women's Retreat, and I was walking among the forest and the trees, and I thought, wow, maybe when we no longer have rebirth, we become trees, because they're not stressing. They are giving us oxygen day in, day out, asking nothing, indiscriminate. I mean, they're really, totally generous with us and keep us alive. So could it be possible that when we no longer come back, we finally come back as much wiser beings, trees?
Well, I hate to break your bubble. First of all, it's not clear that trees can self-reflect. So we can look at, would I want to come back as a tree? But even though there's that natural process that trees are engaged in of taking in carbon dioxide, expelling oxygen, purifying the air, really. However, it's not so clear, I think, to any of us exactly what level of consciousness, say, a dog has, or a cat, or a horse, or an elephant, or, I don't know, a tree. But according to the Buddha, this kind of self-reflection, to see that we have this attachment to a made-up identity, something that's been given to us by other people, teaching us, you're this way, you're that way, this is your name, this is your gender, and then we take that on, but it actually isn't anything solid, because all of it deteriorates and passes away, and so do the trees. So when you hear these very advanced monks talking about, at least the ones I know are monks, talking about, what a sankhara is. Sankhara is a formation. It's based on conditioned phenomena. And everything that we can see, hear, taste, touch, smell are sankharas. There's no core substance to them. As soon as the conditions that they are based upon fall away, they deteriorate into what? Into elements that also deteriorate, that are also based on conditions. Excuse me.
but like I don't really know physics, but something about energy is neither created nor destroyed, matter is not, it just changes shape. Because if you've achieved the deathless, does that mean you still have consciousness or not? Are you beyond consciousness?
So this is a
What is
very
deathless?
interesting question, and depending on who among those who we believe or have the reputation of having gone that far in their realization, they might express it differently. Ajahn Sumedho talks about it as consciousness, but he's putting, again, he says, all the labels, all the names, all the words, those are also sankharas. It's just pointing to something. At best, it's a directional pointer, kind of showing you the way. That there's, and if we're going to talk about it, we have to find some label. We give a label to it. And really the encouragement is to investigate for ourselves and be open to recognizing that which doesn't change. We're talking about that which doesn't change. Ajahn Sumedho says that his realization was that's what consciousness is, not sense consciousness, not the consciousness that, makes sense of what we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, think, but the basic unchanging platform groundedness, space from which you see the Dhamma, which really is the Dhamma. So this is we're getting into an area where I can't tell you about the end of the story because I haven't gotten there yet. But I hear him and I can, you can sort of feel the confidence and the pointing to the various points at which we need to investigate and understand for ourselves, because when we do, it's beyond the description that is possible through language. But the general agreement from everything I've seen from the Buddha is that it's not a tree. Just to kind of take that in. Yeah, darn.
I was so inspired.
I mean, I find the trees very inspiring. Like the ones that we live among are so beautiful and so majestic. The tallest trees in the world live there in coastal California. And, it's very inspiring. And I think that in many ways, nature really gives us the context within which we can become very grounded. We can develop that sense of an island because we can learn everything through nature. But we see the trees fall.
But they don't fret about it.
They rot.
Yeah, but they don't fret it. That's what I love about it.
I mean, they have those experiments where they put plants in a middle school or something, and they tell the kids to yell at one of the plants and praise the other one, and the one that gets yelled at shrivels and doesn't do well. The other one's great. So they're sensitive to something.
Mythbusters, they found that it was actually exposing them to heavy metal music.
And even a tree can be competitive. It wants more light. It will try to grow so that it grabs the light and not let the other trees have it or the other bushes have it.
And they get sick, they get stressed.
Yeah, but do you think that they have, that's like a kind of a Vedana level. But do you think they like I was sitting in that oak tree at Spirit Rock one time, that incredible oak. I was envious of the moss because I was really going through all this stuff with Jaime and I was so distressed. And the moss, it will either get water or it won't. And it's not worrying about it. And I was so envious of that.
But you can ask yourself, is this a form of vibhava tanha, where you want to not be conscious, not be sensitive, not have the difficulties we have, which is understandable. but it's still a kind of craving,
Yeah.
a kind of clinging.
It was.
Yeah. And so to notice that, and then what do we do? Well, being present with that and seeing it as it is. And then what does it feel like if we can let it go? And then we start to get this sense of what it's like to let go of everything, get little glimpses of that.
Then I'll be like the monks.
No, you'll be way beyond the moss. I think.
Moss can't be happy, but Carrie can be happy.
Yeah. Hillary, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. So when it says that only the heedful and meditative attainment can bring great happiness, which I have experienced during the long retreat when I was very heedful and become in the meditation, definitely that happiness is a lot more greater than just go and watch a movie or anything like the sensual pleasure. However, after all, we live in the world of sensual realm, so we get always distracted from sensual pleasure. So my question is, understand the importance of heedfulness, but then what's your suggestion of how we can stay heedful during our daily life, in addition to just go to a retreat all the time?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, one thing that I think you're pointing to is this difference between the happiness that comes from, things going the way we want them to go, having what we want to have, um, you know, pleasant feeling that comes from a sensual source, and what it's like to have that spiritual happiness. So sometimes we can act the same way with the spiritual happiness and really crave it and want more of it, and coming from our ordinary, natural human kind of position of wanting to get rid of something, of really desiring and attaching to things. But then, when we recognize that this spiritual happiness is leading onwards to deeper peace and equanimity and silence, and we start to experience more of that, like you do on retreat, as you're saying, and we start to recognize, especially if we investigate in the way of inquiring, is this kind of happiness something that's there naturally that I can touch into whenever I'm present with it? Or is it also arising and ceasing in a way that's impermanent, the way the sensual happiness is? And maybe it's not the spiritual happiness that you see abiding, but maybe it's the stillness that you can always fall back into, and you can notice that it's really there all the time. So this is the kind of gateway or doorway into that deeper understanding, or that deeper knowing what's truly what is truly relieving us of our suffering. And so this is the encouragement. And then, how do we do that in daily life? Well, I think from my experience, what's helpful is to reflect upon what is my practice right now in this moment. Whether I'm a nun or I'm a lay person, whether I'm, talking about the Dhamma, or I'm talking about, let's try a really ugly topic like politics.
No.
I can be practicing. We can practice. So what is my practice now? What is my practice? If I can be talking about the Dhamma coming from a sense of self, what do they think, or whatever, but can we talk about politics coming from a place of Dhamma rather than the sense of self? Maybe you try it, what can I do in this present moment? Maybe we're at work, maybe we're busy. What can I do to practice here? It's like, okay, I can stop and breathe, become aware that I've just spent an hour, working with this particular problem or whatever it is. And then see, like, what's my mindfulness as I'm doing this? Can I be mindful and present while I'm listening to my manager tell me what they want from me, or what I didn't do right, or whatever. There's always a way that we can practice. And if our intention is, I think that we can encourage each other and remind ourselves that our real intention is to develop in the Dhamma, that all the other things that we do are kind of, what we're doing to sustain our physical life, maybe what we're doing to help other people. And in the midst of that, we can also be really looking at what is the Dhamma in this situation? What is the way that I can practice the Dhamma in this situation? So I feel like to some great degree, we have this opportunity regardless of where we are. And I feel like monastic life has really helped me to see this more and more, because, even though in monastic life, you still have to deal with ordinary, life things, you do have more reminders, of putting the Dhamma into practice, of what it is integrated. Those times of day and times of day when you really come back to your spiritual practice. And so, to the best of your capability, try to build those into your lay life. Waking up in the morning and establishing a kind of reflection you want to have first thing, or those times in the day when you meditate, or those cues that you establish to regain your mindfulness. I'm sure that everybody here has some techniques for coming back to our senses, not those physical senses, but our mental sense of Dhamma. I don't know, does that help any, Hillary?
Yes, very helpful. I've jotted down quite a few notes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I guess
Yes, Elizabeth?
I'd also like to say that a lot of the reminders for me are my own discomfort.
Yes, the dukkha,
Yeah,
like the Buddha said.
like I sort of said I was not having any trouble with right speech. Well, that turned out to not be. I don't have that
As
one
soon as you
figured
said
out
it.
yet.
That's what happens to me.
So I could feel the discomfort that, where I was going and so discomfort is a big reminder.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the Buddha was pointing at from the very beginning of his ministry after enlightenment, talking about the Four Noble Truths. There's dukkha, there's discomfort. And when we experience that discomfort, we know that we have an opportunity for practice. It's right there. Thank you.
And so you were asking about.
Could you speak a little louder,
Oh yeah,
Stephen?
well, it's the first time because
Oh.
working with being heedful throughout the day.
Uh-huh.
So especially when I get tired. And now is the world full of what I saw Gil last week, and he said quick pleasures. Now we live in a world that offers us a lot of quick pleasures.
Mm-hmm.
Quickly look something up on the phone. And it's the real challenge to be able to trust for the slow pleasure. Like if I lay down for a nap because I'm losing the energy to focus and do the things I want to do. But a lot of times I find them not anywhere near as restful as they can be, because as soon as I stop doing something, then my mind starts thinking about all the little things. And it's just a switch. I have a memory from a time I was on retreat long ago where I got to the end of maybe one of the early days and totally exhausted. When I went back to my room in my bed, I couldn't believe just how delicious that bed felt. And I realized that, there I was like fully into being fatigued. I was fully into just that moment of laying down, pulling the covers up, and hearing the crickets. And it wasn't like I'd met something bad or something I had to complain about. I was tired, now I was resting. It's often it's really hard to make that transition, to keep that fullness of experience from when I'm energetic to when I'm fatigued. So that makes sense.
So, is there do you feel the difference of being energetic? I don't know if this is true. I feel like I want to kind of tease that apart a little bit to
Okay.
understand it better.
Sure.
So like what I heard you say is you were practicing hard and you were energetic in the practice and you were really tired and you're really looking forward to lying down and resting and feeling the relief of rest or the deliciousness of that rest, because you're tired. Your body's tired, your mind is tired. And you said it's hard to make that transition.
That was on retreat or a
Right.
special place where like during the day.
Oh, so during a normal day.
During a normal day, if I'm tired, I'm stressed, I go, I should go rest for a little bit. But it's just so hard to switch, from, that activity to now, okay, I'm just going to kind of feel the weight of the body, feel my body, I don't have to do anything, feel my body let go. If I can reach that point, it's really special, but it's so hard to do.
It's like it's harder to pull yourself away from the activities.
Yeah.
In the normal life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I notice it some of my sitting these days where like I get really calm and I get, I'm really feeling sort of the piti, the sort of joy of the quiet and the pleasure. But I keep seeing that myself pull myself away. And I don't know if that's like an anxiety. It's like, but you're not being vigilant, there's all sorts of worries and concerns out there. There's no voice saying that, but I'm just trying to.
It's habit.
Yeah, just that habit of just,
Yeah.
But what problems? I've got a moment here. What problem can I solve?
And it's restlessness.
Yeah.
I think really at the core of it, it's restlessness.
Yeah.
And restlessness is one of the last fetters to fall away. So even when the mind can become quite still, and so even being completely past greed, hatred, and delusion, there still is a movement there.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the problem with sort of our normal life with all of its duties and requirements and patterns, habit patterns, and all these other people to interact with is that it's easy to move from one thing to another in that energy of restlessness. And that restlessness keeps us going from one thing to another. And it's like you said, when we stop, a lot of times the mind is then, well, what's next? What's next? I've got to grab onto something. So when we notice that, I think the way through it is to build in more opportunities to actually stop and to realize that we can't resolve this issue of restlessness by giving into it. That we feel the restlessness and we want to move, and then if we can kind of call upon a quieter voice that's a bit more mature maybe, and just encourage that settling. And then we have to do it a number of times, especially when we're not used to it. Like maybe for a while we're practicing quite a lot and we feel that calm, and we can actually take it into our other activities. But then if we haven't been meditating as consistently, or we've been on more of a constant doing kind of pattern, then when we try to stop, it's really hard to sit still and stop. But we can recognize, yeah, that's just normal. When I've been busy, 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 it's just normal to not be able to really put things down right away. And then what we need is more encouragement. We need to encourage ourselves more to actually put it down, remind ourselves how it does feel when you are able to do that and let it go. And all of this requires heedfulness. It requires mindfulness. It requires noticing, okay, I am having trouble settling, so I need to increase the amount of time and increase the number of times that I can sit down and breathe during the day, sit down and put it all down. And then when it immediately want to do something else, no, come on. No, we're not going to do that now. That kind of thing.
That's sort of, I mean, I certainly know it from my practice, that I'll say, oh my gosh, really restless right now. And go, okay, well, let's see what it feels like in 10 minutes. But I'm able to give myself that sense of patience.
Yeah.
But one of the hard things, especially since I fully retired, was not really knowing how to do nothing. I mean, even meditation is an activity, it's doing something. So those in between places, like, okay, I've got all the things checked off my list, done all this things, but I'm going to rest a little bit. Then the mind
wants to churn things up.
Because, I remember hearing Buddhist Dhamma say, he says, I learned at one point that there's a sense of joy when I solve a problem. So I'll often find my mind searching for problems to solve.
Right, right.
So,
And yeah, and the other thing to do maybe is to look what's underneath that. What's really motivating the restlessness? It's maybe the joy of solving the problem, or maybe the feeling of being alive. Or somehow if I have a lot to do, I'm important, or I'm useful, or something, just maybe inquiring, that kind of contemplation where you ask a question, you're letting that answer arise intuitively and see, what's really behind this restlessness. And, our context changes, like you're saying, like, maybe when we're working in a position where we are working for someone else, there are these expectations of our job and we're fulfilling those, we're doing the right thing. We can kind of, in a subtle way, or maybe a very overt way, I don't know, but we can kind of put the responsibility onto those who are requiring these things of us. But when we're retired and we really have the authority to manage our own time, then, like, what is it that gives me a sense of safety, consistency, importance, value? Is there anything like that caught up in this wanting to be doing all the time? Good questions.
Yeah. No, it's a different, one friend once said, I'm too old to improve myself. And, because, when you're young, you're trying to get yourself to a certain point, but at some point you have to just stop and say, I've got myself to a pretty good point. I need to enjoy this. I think not always, striving, not always trying to make what is better.
Yeah. I mean, even this idea that investigating the nature of reality is more about letting go and relaxing than it is about doing something. And this idea that right effort has so much striving in it, a lot of times that backfires on us. What we really need to do is become more and more calm and let go more and more of that idea of doing.
So heedfulness can be letting go.
Yes.
Yes.
For sure. Yes,
If you're using diligence as another way of saying heedfulness, What's the opposite? Heedlessness. What's the opposite?
Negligence.
Negligence.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I brought you to the point where we ended last time. And then it says, just as one upon the summit of a mountain beholds the groundlings, or those who are below, even so when the wise person casts away heedlessness by heedfulness and ascends the high tower of wisdom, this sorrowless sage beholds the sorrowing and foolish multitude. You really can see the suffering of others when you put your own suffering down. I mean, of course, we can see it in others and empathize with our own suffering, but this kind of recognizing how much suffering there is that we cause ourselves, and be able to see that, how it's possible to set it down. And it says here, the heedful among the heedless, wide awake among the sleepy, the wise person advances like a swift horse, leaving behind a weaker horse. And I know the translation isn't exactly like that, but I prefer to degenderize it a bit. And also, this idea, it's here what I've got is a weak nag. I don't like the implications there. It has some.
We have a weak jade.
A weak jade.
I don't know what a jade is though.
Yeah, that's a little harder too. But it's really, from the Pali, it's really a weaker horse. It's a strong, swift horse passing up a weaker one. And so when we're heedful, when we're applying ourselves with the right kind of effort, not this kind of strive, force, but the kind of letting go and seeing with wisdom, then, there's this awakening that happens, this realizations, and then we can see all of the sort of wasted effort that goes into so many endless tasks. By heedfulness here it's Indra, but it's also Saka. If you read the Pali Suttas, Saka, the king of the Devas, or the leader of the Devas. By heedfulness did Saka become the overlord of the Devas. Heedfulness is ever praised, and heedlessness ever despised. The monk who delights in heedfulness and looks with fear at heedlessness advances like fire, burning all fetters, subtle and coarse. The monk who delights in heedfulness and looks with fear, excuse me, at heedlessness will not fall. He's close to Nibbana. Excuse me. One more time, this final verse in the section. The monk who delights in heedfulness and looks with fear at heedlessness will not fall. He is close to Nibbana. Or the practitioner. One thing that Ajahn Ganha talks about is that whether you're lay or monastic, you can be which in Thai is noble. Sometimes it's translated as monk, but it really means to be noble. The practitioner who delights in heedfulness and looks with fear at heedlessness will not fall. They are close to Nibbana. Any other comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Okay, Elizabeth.
I'm thinking, this, you can correct me, please, that another way of saying heedfulness is the way that Lumpur Sumedho uses awareness.
Yes, I think he would agree to that. He also uses mindfulness interchangeably here. And when he was talking about this verse in the Dhammapada about heedfulness, he switched in mindfulness for part of it. Mm-hmm. So I think so. Mindfulness, awareness, pure consciousness, conscious awareness. He'll put Dhamma in there, all is different words to really point to what doesn't change. And, like mindfulness, well, we think, of course, like I'm mindful, I'm not mindful, I'm heedful, I'm not heedful. But again, it's like, is it the mindfulness itself that's changing? It's really where I'm putting my attention. That makes sense.
And I guess the word awareness was helpful to me because it takes that effort. It's true, sometimes I have to apply effort and pull myself away from something.
Yeah.
But very often it just takes being aware of the situation, and then the right choice is very clear.
Yeah. I mean, we probably all know this feeling of stepping back from a situation. Even calling it a feeling isn't quite right, but we know this experience of stepping back from whatever we're feeling or thinking or in contact with the senses, and to be able to observe it. And awareness, mindfulness, it has this wisdom quality included in it. Mindfulness and sati and sampajanya, this clear comprehension, or this awareness or knowing, as the Thais will call it, this puru, this way of this knowing, and then it's like from some deeper reaches of consciousness, some other kind of intuitive knowing or knowledge comes up. We probably all had that experience. And what's it like when we move through our day based on that? And it doesn't mean that we don't ever think or plan, but it's really a different place to start or to come back to. And it's not so much about what we call it, but we do use words to try to talk about it, to remind ourselves and each other, kind of know that what we're talking about, try to understand what we're talking about. Pointers to it. I remember one time during one of our meetings, Eastbay Dhamma meetings, you talked about awareness as nibbana. And someone else in the room said, no, awareness is not nibbana. And I don't know, if you listen to Luang Pasamato, he uses those terms interchangeably. But I think this is our own investigation that we need to do, to understand what is it that this means to me? How is this known by me in experience? And when we have an insight into the way things are, then suddenly it's like, oh, that's what they were talking about. And it takes a whole different, many dimensions, right? And it's a very different feeling. And if we're on, if this is really a realization of Dhamma, it brings a lot of relief and joy and letting go. And we just don't stay on the same track or in the same groove anymore, you might say. Okay. Shall we go on?
Yes.
Okay, this is section 3 or chapter 3, Chittavagga, so it's the mind. Verse 33. Just as an arrow maker straightens an arrow shaft, even so the discerning person straightens their mind. So fickle and unsteady, so difficult to guard and control. Yeah, isn't it? As a fish when pulled out of the water and cast on land throbs and quivers, even so is this mind agitated. Hence one should leave the realm of Mara. Wonderful indeed it is to subdue the mind, so difficult to subdue, ever swift and wandering wherever it desires. A tamed mind brings happiness. Let the discerning person guard their mind, so difficult to detect and extremely subtle, wandering wherever it desires. A guarded mind brings happiness. So what do those images do to your mind? What comes up?
It's the realm of Mara.
Well, it's Mara is the death. That's what Mara means.
I've heard it's actually the amygdala section of the brain.
The amygdala.
Yeah, the part that tells you you're not good enough and messes with you and makes you insecure and
Yeah, in the suttas, Mara is always trying to lure people away from the practice and into the world.
The devil. Right?
Well, not quite, because the devil, they do call Mara the evil one. Sometimes they'll translate it that way, or it'll be, he'll be spoken of that way.
I translate it as killer of joy.
Killer of joy. Yeah, and he thinks he's bringing joy. He thinks that joy is lots of sensual pleasure. And this, renunciation and living the holy life and rejecting sensual pleasures is really the wrong way to go. That's what he thinks. And so he tries to distract people and keep them away from the path. So the devil, I don't know, he seems to be more malicious. I'm not sure. And I don't know if I would equate the two, but kind of, that's the idea that the devil's more about trying to make people sin, I think, but Mara is more like trying to have people enjoy themselves. And even says, hey, you can do a lot of good and be charitable and you can do so much good in the world, but just stay in the world, okay? Don't do this thing of realizing that all of that just keeps going on and suffering never ends. Just stick in that groove. So yeah, that's Mara.
A lot of those verses, and just as I was talking about that sort of activity of mind, like the fish out of water and so forth, it just doesn't want to settle down. So hearing those verses, this reminded me of that state that I'm working in.
Yeah, the fish flopping around on dry land, that is quite the image of suffering and agitation.
The mind that just reaches and tries to grab all those quick pleasures instead of really facing the big truth.
Yeah, grabbing the quick pleasures. They really don't last very long.
So then you have to grab another one.
Yeah. Dwelling in the cave of the heart without form, the mind wanders far and moves alone. Those who subdue this mind are liberated from the bonds of Mara. Hmm. Wisdom is not perfected in one whose mind is not steadfast, who knows not the good teaching and whose faith wavers. There's no fear for an awakened one, whose mind is not sodden by lust nor afflicted by hate, and who has gone beyond both merit and demerit. It's another quality that people who have realized the path understand really well, that the duality that we experience in the world kind of disappears. It's not about right and wrong or merit and demerit. And I keep quoting this, the Ajahn Pasadо said this too, Ayya Chitananda and me recently, about Ajahn Chah saying that the Dhamma is above evil and beyond good. It's not about good and evil anymore, which is interesting. It's a complete stepping away from samsara and the push and pull, the wanting and the wanting to get rid of.
Can I read this footnote for beyond both merit and demerit?
Sure.
The arahant, having abandoned all defilement, can no longer perform evil actions. Having no more attachment to any plane of existence, his virtuous actions no longer bear karmic fruit.
Yes.
So what does that mean exactly?
There's no attachment to one's actions. So this experience that we hear about and maybe we taste along the way, that brings us closer, is this idea that you completely let go of the sense of self. You're past any kind of desire or aversion for yourself. You're no longer caught up in wanting to get rid of. You just take care of your body and you spontaneously act for the benefit of others. And so you see someone like Ajahn Ganha, doing, and many of the teachers that have that reputation, and you just see them constantly offering support to people to try to help them, usually with a lot of patience and kindness. They all have they still have their personalities, so they may have different ways of acting and speaking, but the idea that they don't make karma comes because there's no attachment to what they're doing. Like Ajahn Ganha created this preserve for this breed of cattle that were going extinct, and helping them come back and have a protected area. And you can think, well, wouldn't that create karma of some kind? In this world, everything creates karma. I mean, it's like whatever we do, there's good and bad involved in it. We can't help it. We come up with a solution for something in this world, and then it has its negative side effects every time, right? So it's hard to imagine how we can act without some negative response or result. And that's true of things that are done in the world, but when someone is acting out of that kind of purity of mind, there's no karma being made that comes back to them. So that's how I understand it. Any other questions or comments so far?
It reminds me of a story I heard about Ajahn Liam, and somebody asked him the question, you do so many things, you're head of the whole Ajahn Chah lineage, so all kinds of people come to you and expect you to solve their problems. How do you handle being, an abbot in such a large way? And he said, I get up in the morning and I see what has to be done, and then I go do it.
Yeah, yeah. And all that baggage that I think most of us human beings have around, what is this going to mean and how are people going to think about it? Or, there's so many things that create all this extra stress for us. But, like Gajin Ganha says, no self, no stress. Or Ajahn Sopa, we went to see this monk, and one of the people with us was asking him about having a healthy sense of self. Isn't it important to have a healthy sense of self? And he said, there's nothing good about any sense of self. I mean, you could just see the cultural clash there. Like there's the Western culture where we're talking about human psychology and knowing that if our mind isn't kind of mentally healthy enough, it's hard to develop in the Dhamma, right? I can see that side. And then, Ajahn Sopa is coming from you just have to let all of that go. Just let all of that go. It's like any sense of self is going to be a problem. And yeah, so that idea that the actions are spontaneous, and whether they work out, whether the effort works out or not is irrelevant to that person who's let go of the attachments. Realizing that this body is as fragile as a clay pot, and fortifying this mind like a well-fortified sea. Fight out Mara with the sword of wisdom, then guarding the conquest, remain unattached. Before long, alas, this body will lie upon the earth, cast away and lifeless like a useless log. Whatever harm an enemy may do to an enemy, or a hater to a hater, an ill-directed mind itself, an ill-directed mind inflicts on oneself greater harm. And the final verse, neither mother, father, nor any other relative can do one greater good than one's own well-directed mind. It's a beautiful sentiment, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Reality, the importance of training the mind. I think the science around this is really fascinating. Listening a little bit to a podcast about discoveries of how the brain works and how it gets rewired. I don't remember exactly what the name of this podcast was, but it talked about meditation and studying the brains of meditators and seeing how they light up differently, and how we can really change ourselves, even our brains. Pretty interesting. Yes, first Allison in the back.
Thank you. So Dhammapada gave a more academic talk with the neuroscientist last week. And
so I don't think people can hear you probably. Is that right, everybody? No. Okay, that might help. But talk a little bit louder, Allison.
Sure. So Dhammapada, I saw her give a talk last week with a neuroscientist. And one of the things, I can't remember which one said it, they talked about predictive coding. It's kind of what Stephen was talking about, where I'm constantly trying to plan and look ahead and make sure that everything's going to be okay. And they said that's really, really hardwired into humans as a way to survive.
Right.
So, but they did say, I do remember, I wrote it down, was they called it the prescriptive coding, and they said meditation was one of, I don't know if it's the only way or one of the few ways that could deconstruct the prescriptive mind.
Okay, so the prescriptive mind is the pattern or the habit or the
Biology.
function of planning and trying to anticipate what will happen and obviously trying to keep us safe.
Predictive.
Predictive. Okay,
Sorry,
predictive. Yeah, and that meditation can deconstruct that. What'd you call it? Predictive
Coding.
Coding.
Sounds like.
Predictive coding,
because
like
neuroscience is probably connected to computers is what I.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so those predictive programs really it can change them. And how many of you have experienced this where instead of speaking from or acting from a plan or a habit, you bring forth spontaneously an understanding or an action?
You know, I think I'm going to say something to somebody, but then when I'm feeling the situation completely something else, just
Something else
from the
comes out.
heart.
And how does that land?
For them or for me? I
Whatever.
like it for myself
Uh-huh.
because I didn't have to I didn't figure it out. It just feels like it came from a more genuine place.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of like when that happens because I spend a lot of time, what am I going to say? And then when I get there, I just kind of let my body kind of
Right.
feel what is the right response.
Yeah. And then the feeling in the body is different.
Yeah, the feeling in the body is different. But I wanted to say that I've been thinking about this recently, the predictive mind. Just as our senses, their job is to basically provide information. The mind's job really is to pay attention to danger. I mean, that's what the mind's job is. And so when we try to reprogram that, there's a lot of discomfort in the body because it's like, wait, am I safe? So it's very interesting to kind of work with that, to just notice the discomfort in the body when we really try to, let go of control, which we don't have anyway.
So I'm thinking that it might be fair to say it's the brain's job.
Yeah, okay, the brain's job.
And there are two words that they're probably, I don't know if there are more than that, but I'm thinking of chitta and mano as the Pali words that get translated as mind. And from what I can tell, the mano is more the thinking mind. So we could say the thinking mind's job is to, try to detect and learn and recognize danger and recognize the activities that could be harmful and try to avoid those. And then the chitta, the mind that really is this field that is rich with wisdom and understanding. In one scripture, it's like it's luminous, that the defilements just come in almost by accident to cloud things, but the mind itself is luminous. And so that would be that's the part that if we rely on that more, or that intuitive wisdom or that awareness, whatever we want to call it, that can be scary for the body. And it is interesting how the body reacts sometimes to things. And if the mind is trained, like the Dhammapada here is trained to encourage us, then the mind might be calm and the body might be really upset.
We just have to notice that. Wow, my nervous system doesn't,
Look at that.
reacting.
Yeah.
That's what it does. That's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. Yes, Olive?
My understanding is that the brain is the body. It's part of the body.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an organ in the body.
It's an organ in the body. And it runs lots of things that are going on with the body. And the mind is a sixth sense. And the job of the mind, the sixth sense, is the way that I understand it, is all of the stories
Mm.
And that's the job, etc. That's my
But
understanding.
what's the purpose of all those stories? I mean, I think in the end, it comes down to what's going to keep us safe. All those stories we tell ourselves really have one purpose, which is, am I okay? Am I secure?
So my mind doesn't do that.
Your mind doesn't do that? Wow. What does your mind do? What does your mind do?
My mind can be very dangerous.
Oh,
Say more.
well, I can understand that.
Yeah,
Say
yeah.
more.
It can get me into trouble, and it can perceive things and when they're not there.
Sure.
And then of course the mind can tell me that this part of my life is so good, I should keep it going. I mean, it's delusional too.
I mean, we all know that, right? That's where
Yeah.
the delusion comes in, or
Yeah.
the desire or aversion, or those are what the teachings are trying to help us recognize and train the mind to let go of those things
Yeah.
or see through them.
I'm not taking them
Yeah.
seriously.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to define the spiritual part of. I don't really like the word spiritual, but then the Dharma part of my thinking. It's not easy to define or even perceive that.
Mm.
That's what I find. When it comes to the Dhammapada, I'm assuming that this is kind of like a personal poem book, and there's certain passages that are going to appeal to me, and that's due to my conditioning and my mind. And so when they jump off the page, it resounds with me, and like just about anything, any kind of interpretation.
Can you give us an example of one that strikes you?
Well, when you come to to be heedful, that's very Shakespearean, and then heedlessness is more lackadaisical. When you just let things wander around. So my interpretation is that.
And how about diligence and negligence? Does that land differently?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So maybe for you, that might be a richer interpretation or translation.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. It's going to be a very personal, subjective response.
Yeah.
Well,
the words land differently
yeah,
with all of us, right?
Yeah, right. So when I hear you talk, it's going to have a kind of response in me that it's going to have another response in Carrie.
Yeah. Yes, and I think it's so important to so maybe I should ask you. So what is it that you find inspiring in a good direction? Or what is it that you feel is helpful for rising up out of suffering, say?
Yeah, the not self. Absolutely. And sometimes I do the Tonglen.
Certain practices.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
When you're thinking of ill-directed mind, I'm not always capable of directing my mind. It tends to veer off really quickly into some thought pattern.
Yes.
Even when I try to direct it.
Yeah, I don't know if you could hear Mayur online or not. She's talking about the ill-directed mind and how easily the mind slips off and becomes ill-directed, and how hard it is to direct it. You can't always direct it. And it's a skill, really. And it's first and foremost, we have to have the mindfulness to realize that the mind is going off in a unhealthy direction. And I find for myself that instead of being harsh with it and trying to, criticize it or yank it back, to try to understand what it's up to and to maybe try to relearn a different pattern. Because, like one of the common patterns is negativity about ourselves, for example, or negativity about the world or, someone else, this kind of fault finding, critical mind. And again, like we've been saying, that's developed as a coping mechanism or a way to be safer, perhaps, or, some reason for that to be there. But when we become more aware of what's happening in our mind and aware of the results, we might see that it negatively affects our mental state, our ability to be happy, be productive, in a good way in our life, things like that. Maybe the thinking of our mind, I don't know if anyone here has had this kind of thought, but maybe sometimes people feel offended by someone and their mind going off in an unwholesome direction is to really start to hate that person or really want to revenge from that about that person or something like that. And then, the Dhamma is constantly trying to show us that those kinds of patterns in our mind or reactions we might have are really detrimental. So an ill-directed mind is one that's maybe learned by watching our parents or by, practicing a very unwholesome, toxic pattern. And then it goes that way because that's the habit that's developed. But that we can actually change that. And we can use, usually it's the opposite, to help direct the mind in a wholesome direction. So it really is a matter of training. A lot of times I think it's like training a dog or, sometimes we can help the children that we raise and train them, help them develop better habits than what they brought in with them, things like that. And, to realize that it can take some effort and some time, but having a clear understanding of what is wholesome and what is unwholesome is crucial, first of all. And we may not recognize that if it's something we're so used to and we're so used to experiencing, to see in, other people. And a lot of times we get caught up in the way other people are acting. And come back to it's good to come back to the reality that we are responsible for our own actions, our own speech, and our own thoughts. Not the ones that just pop into our mind. That's from old experience. But what we do with it from there, if we give it extra energy, if we follow the thought pattern. So when when we're cultivating mindfulness or we're developing this, then we want to try to catch that point where the mind's going in an ill-directed way. And the sooner we catch it, or as soon as we catch it, wherever that is, then we turn it. And sometimes we need to investigate that to see, especially if feelings have arisen with it, then we investigate those feelings and allow those feelings to process through without taking action on them. And that's what helps us train the mind to a well-directed way of operating. So it's important not to become discouraged by the fact that the mind is doing this stuff, because this is natural for human beings. but that we also have the responsibility really to guide the mind, train it.
I'm in another group where we're reading the floods. Ajahn Chito. And we're talking about equanimity the other day. So today I was driving and something happened and I felt aversion and blah, blah, blah. And then I noticed, oh, wow, I really feel aversion around that. Okay, fine. So my question is that equanimity when you notice, oh, I really felt aversion about that, and you just kind of are okay with that, with the fact that I've had a strong reaction, but is that kind of like equanimity where you kind of recognize what's happening, but you don't really get caught in it?
Well, certainly it's mindfulness,
Okay.
right? Because you're seeing it and you're not caught up in it. And so mindfulness is that ability to observe, and you're seeing it as an object to you. You know, it's like, oh, I look at that. You know, have a flash of, sexual desire, or have a flash of jealousy, or have a flash of something, or maybe more than a flash, and you look at it and you go, wow, look at that. But that idea that you're not like caught up in it, this is the benefit of mindfulness. And the sampajanya, the clear comprehension, or panya, wisdom, that you have available, that we've developed by practice and learning, then you really can see it for what it is. And so equanimity might be there. It might be equanimity. Equanimity means the mind is not affected. The mind is unruffled. It stays steady no matter what comes through. So maybe equanimity is there.
Oh, here's a version. Oh, bye. There's a version. Bye.
Yeah.
We refer to equanimity as non-preferentiality.
Oh.
No preference.
Right.
Wow.
Non-preferentiality.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because it kind of depends on what we're looking at, I think. I mean, we may not have a preference with sights, sounds, smells, tastes, what we feel against our body, or there might still be preferences there, but the mind isn't, like in the sutras it said, this contact, it doesn't invade the mind and remain. It's like you see it. Ajahn Sumedho's been talking a lot about, he's in a 90-year-old body. And, he's like, yeah, it's not pleasant. His eyesight is pretty bad, and his hearing is pretty bad, and his walking is very awkward, and he needs help to walk. He was using a cane. I don't know if it's still enough now, but and he said even though he's quite healthy for a 90-year-old man, he still acknowledges that having to go in to get shots in his eye, it's not a pleasant thing. It's not like you don't have a preference. You'd rather not have this problem, but knowing it for what it is, he said, the way he thinks of it is the personality doesn't like it. But the awareness that's there is not affected. The awareness is, stable and observing what it is, and that is not caught up in whether you have to get a shot in your eyeball or not. So it's interesting to explore that.
Yeah.
When do we experience that?
We do prefer wisdom.
Yeah.
We do prefer the company of the wise. But,
we would prefer that the people we love not make stupid decisions and bring a lot more suffering into their life, right?
Yes.
right.
Duh.
But it all is what we get.
Yeah, it's not the way the world works.
Yeah, I remember that think it was Suzuki Roshi, it says, even though we know that weeds have Buddha nature, we prefer flowers over weeds. You know? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have a question. Is there always preference until there's no sense? Maybe you can, until there's no self?
I mean, there are a lot of references to not having likes and dislikes, or maybe more accurately, not operating based on likes and dislikes. So, you know, when we're caught up in our likes and dislikes, obviously that we make that very clear usually to people, and we have a lot of suffering over it. So there's going to be, from what I've heard, there is painful feeling, there is pleasant feeling, there is a preference, there are preferences from the perspective of this human form and the personality view. But when we have set that aside and we can observe without that attachment, then you just notice that these are different phenomena. They arise and cease, they pass through, that there's the ones that you like, the ones that you don't like, but you're not operating from that because you see, like this verse that we saw earlier, it's like you're at the top of the mountain, you're watching this whole thing going on and you see the suffering in it, but you're not down there in the thick of it. Any other comments or questions from people? Yes.
No, I was thinking about when you were responding to my law,
Uh-huh.
and you brought up raising kids.
Yes.
I was thinking, you know, when I think about training my mind, or training is not exactly the word, there's a little aversion. But I'm thinking actually what works for me is parenting or befriending.
Mm-hmm.
And I often, you know, how I am towards my kids, through this years of practice, I'm noticing it's almost the same thing I do with
Yes.
myself.
That's right.
Making mistakes, but then noticing, okay, that didn't work. So I guess.
It's beautiful.
And this is just so, I'm so grateful that I have them. And yeah, so it's almost like the same thing. When I don't know, I know this doesn't work with the kids, right? So yeah.
Sveta.
Sveta.
So how many children do you have?
I have two.
Two, and how old are they?
13 and 17.
13 and 17. So I have two also. 51 and 38, maybe. No, 48. Yeah, 51 and 48, something like that. And yeah, I agree. So this idea that when we're training ourselves, but I also like that idea of befriending. What's the other word you used? Parenting.
Yeah.
Parenting our mind. Yes. Lovely. And being able to do that for ourselves and being able to do that for our children in the same way. Mm-hmm. And the more we let go of or set aside the sense of self, the more we are taking care of ourselves, caring for ourselves, the same way we take care of and care for others. And that is a beautiful thing. So this comes into balance. Instead of, I want mine, we start to see there is no mine, there's nothing, we can't own anything. It's not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. Then we can guide our mind, befriend it, parent it, and we can do that for our children. So when we have children, of course, then we have this responsibility. We've accepted this responsibility to help them. And the same with the teacher, or maybe in your partnership, or, other relationships where you have maybe a kind of agreement that you help each other. Maybe your Dhamma friends or other members of your family, where there feels like there's, for our parents, when that time in life when your parents aren't parenting you anymore, you're having to take the parenting role and take care of them. There's that responsibility. But if we're developing in these qualities that the Buddha is teaching us, then more and more we're taking care of ourselves and taking care of them in the same way. And I like that, because it's like you said, we see, oh, well, this doesn't work, this isn't working, that didn't go so well. And maybe it would have worked for our mind, but it doesn't work for someone else's, or vice versa. And just learning as we go. And a number of you heard me recount this before, but Ajahn Ganha is saying to me, you have to train yourself 100% and train others 100%. And then later he's like, train yourself 100%, train others maybe 50%. And it's like, okay, I have to do the best I can to, train myself. Certainly training myself. We can always understand what the human body and mind may be going through because we're in it. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think it's very good to pay attention to words and how they land for us, like what you were saying, Olive, too, and to really investigate, what do I really think this means? I have a lot of faith in the Buddha. So I feel like when he says, wisdom, let's see, we could start with the very first one we had today, like appamado amatapadam. So that's this appamado is this diligence or carefulness or heedfulness, and the amata is deathless, or there's no death there. Padang, the path. So if this is what leads me to this deathless realm, and pamado, which is the opposite, it's the carelessness or the negligence or the heedlessness. Machuno, that's the death. It's like Mara, and Padang again is the path. So it's like that leads me to death. So then, if I trust the Buddha, then I'm going to ask myself, what are these words? What does this mean? Not in words, but what's the experience of this? Can I know this through my own experience? Can I experience how being careful, circumspect, leads me to this freedom from death? Can I know how carelessness, and maybe I'll think of it as a lack of restraint or following that ill-directed path, leads me to death? And, I can think about experiences I've had, choices I've made in my life. I can look at the state of my mind, and maybe I can see how this works, experience it. And and to recognize, I like to look at different translations or look these Pali words up and look at the different ways they can be expressed in English, because different words have a different impact on our minds. And then, in the experience of it, what do I really think it is? How does it feel? And to try to be careful not to just be forming my own views and opinions and ideas, but to really check it out against what I see in the suttas, what I hear in the reflections of teachers, so that I'm not kind of just building my own fantastical Dhamma, ideas, but to really see how this relates to actual experience. Oh, Joyce, go ahead. You're muted, yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
I just don't know how to use all those little things to click on. Is it okay if I just go back to training the puppy?
Sure.
Would that be okay? I just remember so well. I used to follow Jack Cornfield a lot, and I remember when he told this, I was just so charmed by this story.
Mm.
And the thing about it is how he did it with kindness, understanding, patience, humor. And that's not how we react to our minds. There's that kind of like resistance, maybe some harshness, maybe even anger, like, oh, darn, frustration. And this image of the puppy, it just helps so much to just shift that mood. If you could just recall it at those times. Anyway, I hope this is valuable to people, because it has been to me, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we all have different experiences. Growing up on the farm, the training of animals wasn't all that gentle or patient. And it was something that bothered me, but you're told, you gotta toughen up. You're too soft, you're too sensitive. So, we have to deal with our conditioning and see our way through to the Dhamma truth. And I think if that image of the puppy and how, you may have had an experience of a kind of gentle, but very effective training, that's wonderful. And maybe, like we've said, training isn't the right model or idea at all. Maybe that sense of befriending, which the Buddha also talked about, being our best friend. And yeah, I think it's a lovely image, and it's lovely to use images that really support us in going in the right direction. So valuable.
Can I say just one more thing about that I forgot? I just remember the way he told it is that he didn't have any anger, and the puppy wouldn't run away, and then he'd pick it up and he'd put it back. Puppy, stay. And then the puppy would run off. Then he'd put it back. Puppy, stay. And it was just a repetition, but it was done with such kindness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm going on, but to me, it was just so dear. And I think we could be less harsh with ourselves about our frailties and whatever. And it's a hard lesson for me to learn, by the way, because I had a really harsh father. So I kept him a long way. Thank you.
Yeah, it can be a lot to unravel those patterns learned in the past, but such a relief when it happens. And to know that we're capable of that kind of change is really helpful. And to really question our views and opinions, because sometimes we can believe that harshness or anger actually has a valid use. That's often promoted in this culture, and to really examine them. Is that true? From my own experiments, I would say I don't think so. And that's what I see the Buddha saying, that that's, like trying to throw a burning coal at someone and you're always going to burn your hand, something like that. Yeah, so those are good images. And the more that we can let go of the sense of self, the more kind we naturally become. Because that harshness is also about the sense of self. It's a harsh taskmaster or giving reprimand or punishment, And without the sense of self, we don't have the need for that anymore for ourselves. It's more guidance, or just like you say, noticing what works and what doesn't work. Giving ourselves the teaching, the guidance. Well, we have about 15 minutes left. Would you like to meditate a little bit, or would you rather go on with more verses?
Let's meditate.
Yeah, let's meditate. All right, great. I think that's a swell idea. So find a comfortable position. We can start by checking in with the body and noticing how it feels. It's been me sitting here for a while, and noticing the impression from all these words that we've been using, the ideas that come with them, the feelings that arise from them. And breathing. Letting go into being aware, present with the body, with our feeling. Being that position of witnessing. And relaxing. And be with our breath as it goes in and goes out. Letting go of tension. Letting go of desire. Of wanting anything to be different than it is. Just relaxing here in the present moment. And maybe after all this talking, there's a little sleepiness. We can bring in some extra energy when we breathe in. And that's the part of the breath that inspires. And we can bring to mind what inspires us. Maybe from this text or from our practice or from the Dhamma that we hear, or examples in the world of people doing things, saying things that encourage and inspire others to do what's good. Maybe our own actions are inspiring to us. When we do something that we know is good, kind, generous, wise. And the energy we want to apply is the energy that helps us stay attentive and clear. Not frantic, not restless, but stable, supportive energy. If we are restless, then we can put a little more attention on our out breath. bringing more peace and calm to the body and to the mind. And if we are finding a kind of balance, we can breathe in and have the image of a fountain bringing forth inspiration, cleansing, joy, and the out-breath of water flowing down, calm and smooth, free. Notice any colors that come into the mind's eye. This is perhaps just imagination, but it leads our energy. And can bring a kind of uplift and happiness to the mind. You can also maybe use that image or another image that brings inspiration and joy and happiness to bring in some loving kindness. And you can let the water flowing out with the out breath bring a sense of flowing, letting that loving kindness flow in all directions. And peace, joy, and happiness fill your heart, fill your mind, your life. All right. So today our meeting together goes from verse 28 to 43. And we'll pick up on 44 next time. So thank you everyone for coming. It's very nice to talk about the Dhamma with you all.
Thank you, Aya, for the teaching.
You're welcome.